You know nothing, Jon Snow. Hey guys, what's up? And today I'm gonna do a review of the 5th season of the one and only Game of Thrones. Woo! Beware of spoilers of the previous 4 seasons. Damn it, I gotta recap this. Long story short, we have the good family of House Stark and the bad family of House Lannister. Although Jaime and Tyrion Lannister isn't bad, the Lannisters already teamed up with the Freys and the Boltons to kill Starks, and they were successful. The only few Starks now are Arya, who managed to escape the capital, King's Landing, and fled to the east. Sansa, who was stuck in the capital until Joffrey the King was poisoned. Peter Baelish took Sansa away and escaped. Jon Snow was still in the Night's Watch. Bran Stark fled to the north after his hometown Winterfell got destroyed by Theon Greyjoy. Theon Greyjoy turned good at the end, however, but was captured and tortured by Ramsay Bolton. Tyrion killed his dad before his dad kills him, and he and Varys fled to the east also. Tommen was the king, and Stannis was about to attack Tommen and try to be king, while Daenerys really wanted to be queen with her 3 dragons. Okay. By the way, watch the recap video I made. It's less than half an hour. Totally worth your time. Okay, let's get into it. The first episode is The Wars to Come. I hate to say it, but this is easily one of the most boring episodes in the show so far. Season 5 is off to a weak start, but because Season 5 is a whole new chapter and whole new world, this episode almost feels like the pilot episode. I'm actually really interested on what would Tyrion and Varys do, and how they will meet up with Daenerys. That's something I look forward to. And I also look forward to seeing Arya on her new journey in the free city of Braavos. But she's not on this episode. Damn it. The writers still follow the pattern of writing a big scene at the end. And the scene at the end isn't that big. It's just kinda sad. It's quite normal overall. Moving on to episode 2, The House of Black and White. Still, because there's too much storylines, we still don't know what happened to Rickon, Gendry, Bran, the Hound, and Theon. But still, the main characters like Daenerys, Cersei, Tyrion, Arya, Jon, and Jaime are also mentioned on this episode, and I think that's pretty enough. This episode is full of great moments, although in the full picture, not much progress had been made. Sam made Jon Snow join the election of the new Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and he won, thanks to Maester Aemon. That's a great scene. And I really like how the show doesn't tell you which character is bad and which is good. It's for you to decide. Like in Dorne, what happened to Oberyn? His wife Ellaria wanted to use Cersei's daughter Myrcella as vengeance. What's most interesting about this episode, however, is what will happen to Arya. Back in Season 2, I predicted that the Faceless Man would return, and he did. So I'm excited. On Daenerys' side, things went bad, and that's when the show teaches us about politics, which I really like. But the ending scene is basically Drogon returning and flew away again. Probably the weakest episode ending of the show since Season 2. Next is Episode 3, High Sparrow. Although, again, not much happened, but they are full of crucial moments in this episode that I would like to talk about. First, Arya's life in Braavos. I don't want to spoil anything, but I want to point out that the writers created a whole new world in Arya's storyline. Strange and mysterious, and it feels religious in an ancient, medieval way. That's why I'm so interested. Then we have Tommen marrying Marjorie, and they also had a brief sex scene off screen, and it was somewhat satisfying. I'm also really interested on what would happen to Sansa and what would Peter do to Sansa. And yes, Sansa had returned to a familiar place, and she started to understand how to pretend and how to lie. The character of Jon Snow is even more likable on this episode. We can see his kind side, and we can also see his tough side on this episode. But what surprises me the most is Tyrion and Varys in Volantis, which created another cliffhanger for the next episode. Overall, it's a pretty neat and nice episode. Then it's episode 4, Sons of the Harpy. The drama we all needed has returned. The story continued with more drama and storyline expansions. Although the storyline didn't focus on characters and make us root for them, it creates new problems for the characters to deal with, which is a more inferior method of writing than making us root for the characters, but nonetheless acceptable. We have problems in King's Landing concerning the religious riots, the faith militant, the High Sparrow. And then we also have another group of killers and marine called the Sons of the Harpy. We also get to see Dorne on the map. Jaime and Bronn arrived at Dorne, and Ellaria Sand planned for revenge, which creates a bit of a pickle for Cersei. And man, Tyrion is still my favorite character. He understood Valyrian. He could tell who a person is just by looking at their clothing and belongings. And with a shocking ending, this episode is quite good. Over to episode 5, Kill the Boy. Not as good as the last episode, but still a decent one. We still don't know what happened to Varys, Arya, Rickon, Gendry, Margaery, Jaime, Bronn, Bran, the list goes on. This episode mainly focuses on Ramsay and Theon, aka Reek, and how is Miranda, Ramsay's girlfriend, is jealous of another girl who's actually marrying Ramsay. And then there's a small reunion at Winterfell. That's really cool, but also raised a lot of problems, and it is the mind games between Ramsay and Miranda. And Jon Snow started to do risky things that are controversial, like protecting the wildlings from the White Walkers. But the last couple of scenes are also somewhat entertaining, and also unfortunate. And then we have the second half of the season, starting off with episode 6, Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken. The lowest rated Game of Thrones episode on IMDb and various other critics' websites. It has a surprisingly low score of 8.0. I mean, I don't hate this episode, but indeed it's arguably the weakest episode of the whole series so far. It's straight up boring, and some scenes look like they are forced to be written, which makes the episode feel like a filler. The most interesting thing about this episode is actually Arya's life in Braavos. We see Arya go through some seemingly unfair treatments, and I rooted for her. Then there's Jaime and Bronn having probably the most anticlimactic fight of the series with the sand snakes. No one died, no one got hurt, no one won, the fight was stopped. And the last scene, I like how the producers executed it, but it's just confusing and predictable in general. And it's a little bit pretentious as well. However, my favorite thing about this episode is that Echo, Mr. Echo from Lost showed up. Last season we got Mycroft Holmes, and this season we got Mr. Echo. But that's it. I just wish there's more to this episode. Next is episode 7, The Gift. It doesn't seem like it, but this is actually the best episode of the season so far. There's a lot of turn of events and surprises on this episode. What happened to Jorah and Daenerys was quite stunning. What happened to Sansa was pretty sad. And I really liked Alfie Allen's performance here. He looked so traumatized. I'm still wondering what happened to the Hound and Varys. And also Bran, because he didn't show up in the majority of Season 5. Stannis was about to fight the Boltons, which is something that I look forward to. But the ending scene, what a turn of events. It seems that the most powerful man in King's Landing was the High Sparrow. Then the story progresses on to episode 8, Hardhome. This season might have some of the slowest and the weakest episode of the show, but you gotta admit, this episode, damn. Probably the best since the Reigns of Castamere. Arya continued to have her interesting new life. Tyrion continued to be smart. Cersei got herself some more troubles. Sansa learned more secrets, and Jon Snow made an epic decision. I'm giving a spoiler alert too. I love those scenes where Tyrion and Daenerys talk. It's fun to watch them interact, because we never expected them to meet each other. And since they're two of my favorite characters of the show, seeing them interact with each other is pretty cool. Arya became another person, and guess what? Oysters, clams, and cockles. I finally figured out why are the people saying this so much. Cersei hit a new low after she was captured and imprisoned by High Sparrow. I think she kind of deserved it because she's just a terrible person. Also, I like the scene where Sansa was being really mean to Theon. Then Theon admitted that he didn't kill Bran and Rickon, actually. I rooted for Theon there. But the second half was quite mind-blowing indeed. Tormund became someone really good and supported Jon Snow on his mission to form alliance with the Free Folk so that they can all survive the winter together. It's a tough call, but it's the right call. But unexpectedly, the White Walkers came too soon. They were like walkers in Walking Dead, except they wore armor, they had a leader, they had strategies. The scene where they close the gate is very intense, and all the other scenes on that massacre is amazing. Surprisingly, no main characters died. Tormund, Jon Snow, and Ed escaped alive. But the scene where Jon Snow destroyed a White Walker with his Valyrian steel sword was amazing. And the last scene where all the dead people turned into White Walkers was stunning. And the Night King was raising his hand. I don't know. The ending also gave us a familiar silence. Then it's episode 9, The Dance of Dragons. It's the 9th episode, so we're expecting some epic battle or fight scenes. Well, but actually, there's not much going on this episode. Don't get me wrong, I like this episode, but it's just not as good as other 9th episodes. For the last 4 seasons, we have Ned's execution, we have the Battle of Blackwater, we have the Red Wedding, we have the Battle of the Wall, but we got a fighting pit on this episode. But still, it's quite satisfying at the end. I'm giving a spoiler alert anyways. Stannis and Melisandre just made an insane decision to burn Stannis' daughter, Shireen, alive. And that's one of the most painful scenes I've ever watched on the show. Rest in peace, Shireen. And then the ending was basically Jorah fighting in the fighting pits again. And suddenly, he threw a spear at Daenerys, but he's actually aiming for a son of the Harpy behind Daenerys. So everyone panicked, and the sons of the Harpy returned, and they were hiding everywhere, and they showed up. It was crazy. And Daenerys was surrounded by the sons of the Harpy, until Drogon came and scared away all of them. And then Daenerys just rode Drogon and flew away. And yeah, that's pretty epic, but it wasn't as epic as expected. Moving on to episode 10, Mother's Mercy, another controversial Game of Thrones episode that highlights a lot of important events. But this episode also won an Emmy for Outstanding Writing. You know, the Emmys love to give outstanding writing to pilot episodes and season finales. Like episode 6, I don't hate this episode, but there are indeed a couple of flaws. But if you ask me if this is a good or bad episode, I'd say it's good. There's a lot to talk about on this episode, and I'm definitely gonna give another spoiler alert. First, let's talk about Stannis the Manus. Man, is he stubborn. He burnt his daughter alive. His wife killed herself. He sent his advisor Davos away. His witch Melisandre abandoned him. Ramsay destroyed their food, and half of his army left already. He had nothing to lose but himself. And yes, he still marched to Winterfell and lost miserably. Of course. But wait, is he the last Baratheon? No, because Gendry is still alive. The problem with the Stannis scenes on this episode is it's too fast-paced. He basically lost everything in the span of 2 episodes. I think the writers should have given his storyline a little bit more time. And the scenes where the soldiers tell Stannis that his wife died, half of his army's gone and Melisandre left, that was a cheesy scene just thrown at your face. An underwhelming way to show Stannis' fate. On the other hand, Theon and Sansa really left off this season in a dramatic way by jumping out of the Winterfell, literally. And I'm glad the reek inside Theon was gone. I hope. But dude, Arya's scene was so good. Meryn Trant was whipping little girls as he whipped Arya. Arya had no reactions. What the hell? She's so tough. And then Arya just revealed herself and slayed Meryn. But unfortunately, the waif and the faceless man made Arya blind in a very Lynchian, nightmarish scene. I thought Arya was just dreaming. This man would suddenly kill himself, had infinite number of faces, and then Arya went blind suddenly. It's like a horror fantasy. Myrcella was poisoned to death in Jaime's arms, and that is a miserable way to leave this season for Jaime. But Myrcella also died in the most peaceful way ever. That scene where 1,000 Dothrakis came out of nowhere and ran around Dany for a few minutes, that was pretty confusing, but Daenerys left this season epically. Gotta give it that. Cersei's scene was quite insane too. I do kinda hate Cersei, but she being treated like this, it's horrible. Props to Lena Headey for making facial expressions and all that, although she had a stunt double. The last scene was shocking enough. Although I knew it's gonna happen long before I watched it, I wish there was more build up to his death. But I kinda know why that Jon Snow died all of a sudden in such an underwhelming way. Maybe it's because he's not really gonna be dead. Maybe he's gonna be alive again. Who knows? And I'm right. When people found out Jon Snow's fate, it's all over the internet. And I knew if Jon Snow was alive or not. I'm guessing Melisandre would resurrect him somehow or whatever. But that fucker Ollie. Not only did he kill Ygritte, he killed Jon Snow. He gotta die, man. All the main characters had a tragic experience on this episode. And still, the episode is good, despite the flaws. At the end, this season is pretty good, but still, it's the weakest and the worst season in the show so far. It has a weak and slow start, and there are underwhelming scenes. Instead of building tension and suspense on a character like Ned in Season 1 and Tyrion on Season 4, this season just kinda creates problems for the main characters, like Sons of the Harpy and the Sparrow, the Faith Militant. They're just a threat, which is not necessarily related to the Iron Throne. A lot of death scenes in this season are disappointing, because death scenes was epic last season. It was the reckoning of a character. But death scenes on this season is more like an event. And also, where the hell is Bran Stark? I kinda like the idea of Arya, Tyrion, and Varys being in Essos. It makes the story more interesting. But other than that, there's not much to be interested about. I just hope that the writers can balance between shocking scenes and meaningful scenes, because the writers rely on the element of surprise too much on this season. Nonetheless, it was an expensive season. They really put a lot of effort. The acting is great and the story is okay. The worst episode is episode 6, Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken, and the best is episode 8, Hardhome. Game of Thrones Season 5 is a season worth watching. I was gonna give it an 8, but the last 3 episodes made me give it a 9 out of 10. So, have you watched Game of Thrones Season 5? From 1 to 10, how much would you rate it? Like if you like and subscribe if you want more. Oysters, clams, and cookies.